We're jumping straight in today with something that really feels like a major pivot in U.S. policy. I mean, this October 3rd, 2025 incident, U.S. forces hitting a suspected drug boat off Venezuela, 4 people killed.
Yeah, and if you only look at that one strike, you miss the wider context. It wasn't just a one-off.
Right.
That was actually the 4th American strike down there in the Southern Caribbean just in the last month.
4 strikes in a month. Okay.
So our goal today really is to get past those initial reports, the headlines about a successful bust, and really dig into the legal stuff, the military side of things. That's pretty unprecedented here.
It feels like we're trying to understand how we got from what we usually think of as counter-narcotics work to something the administration is now calling armed conflict. That's a huge leap.
It really is.
Okay, so let's unpack the October 3rd strike itself. 4 people dead, international waters, but close to Venezuela, and the administration's justification was immediate, very absolute.
Defense Secretary Hegseth, he said the intel was, without a doubt, solid, targeting a drug vessel. And he didn't just call them smugglers.
No, he used the term narco-terrorists.
Exactly. Narco-terrorists. That specific framing is important.
And then President Trump weighed in with this staggering claim about the potential impact.
Oh, yeah. The magnitude claim. He said the vessel had enough drugs on board to kill 25,000 to 50,000 people.
Which is, I mean, that's an enormous number.
Right.
Designed to signal a massive threat, clearly.
Absolutely. But it's worth noting that when we dig into the details...
Which is what we do here.
Right. Neither the Pentagon nor the White House actually gave specifics. We don't know who was killed, what kind of drugs, the exact amount. Just that projected huge death toll.
Does that kind of rhetoric, paired with holding back the basic facts, maybe suggest that the strategic aim here might be more about projecting military power than just a simple drug bust?
I think it certainly helps set the stage for that, yeah. And the military hardware they've moved in there reflects it. This isn't your typical Coast Guard presence we've seen historically.
No. What are we talking about?
The scale is, well, it's significant. You've got F-35 jets deployed down in Puerto Rico. There are 8 U.S. warships carrying thousands of sailors and Marines operating in the Southern Caribbean.
8 warships?
8. Plus, reports indicate at least 1 nuclear-powered submarine is active in the area, too.
Wow. Okay, that's not chasing speedboats. That sounds more like a fleet prepared for a much more serious conflict, like positioning for a major confrontation.
It's a massive concentration of force, and you need a strong justification for that, something beyond just standard policing at sea.
And it's been lethal, as you said. This wasn't the start.
No. The October 3rd strike followed a pattern. Back in early September, there was a U.S. attack, 11 people killed on a vessel. Then later that month, 6 more were killed in 2 separate strikes. So you add the 4 from October 3rd, we're seeing a pretty rapid and deadly escalation over just a few weeks.
Okay, so this huge military buildup, the F-35s, the subs, the repeated lethal strikes, this leads us right to the core issue, doesn't it? This legal redefinition that changes the whole game.
Exactly. This is the real aha moment, I think. It came out through a leaked notification to Congress.
Leaked, okay.
Yeah. It revealed the administration formally designated this whole campaign against the cartels as a non-international armed conflict.
The NIA.
NEAC, non-international armed conflict.
That's the key legal piece. That classification, NIAC, it's typically been used for groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS. Applying it to drug cartels, well, it fundamentally shifts the legal basis for using force.
It gives the administration wartime powers, essentially.
Broad wartime powers, yes, under that designation.
Okay, for listeners maybe not deep in the weeds on legal terms, can we break down the difference? Like, normally, if the Coast Guard stops a drug boat, right, they're operating under law enforcement authority. Police powers.
So if they use lethal force, it has to be justified, usually as self-defense, right? Preventing immediate harm. It gets investigated like a police shooting might.
Precisely. You shoot to stop an immediate, credible threat. But under this NISK designation, the military is operating under the laws of armed conflict.
And what does that mean in practice?
It means they can target and kill individuals based simply on their status as members of the designated hostile group. They become enemy combatants.
Regardless of whether they're actively shooting back or posing an immediate threat at that exact moment.
Correct. Their affiliation makes them a legitimate target under the laws of war. You're essentially treating that drug vessel not just as a crime scene, but as a military objective.
That is a profound shift, a huge jump in authority. We've gone from, like you said, Coast Guard law enforcement
Which has been the norm for decades.
to basically a declaration of war footing justified by this NIS classification that we only know about because it leaked.
And that's exactly why you're hearing alarm bells from legal experts, from human rights groups. They're seriously questioning the basis for this. Because, they argue, treating suspected traffickers like soldiers in an armed conflict, it risks breaching international law. These cartels, they aren't states. They don't have traditional military structures.
So the concern is that this sets a dangerous precedent.
It definitely sets a precedent. The administration isn't just dealing with drug boats today. They're building a legal framework that could allow similar military actions against other non-state groups anywhere tomorrow. That's the bigger picture here.
And this isn't happening in a vacuum geographically either.
Yeah.
They've also been designating various cartels as terrorist organizations, right? In Mexico, Ecuador, Venezuela.
Yes, that's a parallel track.
Right.
And that terrorist designation, it sort of boosts the authority to target them militarily across borders,
Wow.
potentially.
So even though the admin hasn't said which specific groups fall under this new armed conflict umbrella,
They haven't specified publicly, no. But the legal tools are clearly being put in place for a potentially wider regional effort, not just these specific incidents at sea.
okay, let's shift focus a bit to the geopolitics. Because all this military action, these strikes, they're happening right off the coast of Venezuela. That has to connect to the existing tensions with the Maduro government.
Oh, absolutely. You can't separate this from the whole situation with Caracas. President Maduro in Venezuela, he's already condemned these strikes, calls them U.S. aggression, violation of sovereignty, even though this latest one was technically in international waters.
And the U.S. side keeps accusing Maduro and his inner circle of being involved in drug trafficking, which he denies.
Right. Washington maintains those accusations strongly. And remember, the pressure on Maduro has been ramping up.
Didn't they just increase the reward for his capture?
They did. Back in August, the U.S. doubled the reward for information leading to Maduro's arrest, bumped it up to $50 million.
$50 million. Okay, so how does this military campaign, this NIAC designation, fit into that larger strategy of putting pressure on the regime?
Well, declaring it an armed conflict, it legally reinforces the U.S. narrative. It frames the drug trafficking near Venezuela not just as crime, but as hostile action by narco-terrorists.
Which helps justify the military presence.
Exactly. It paints a picture, implicitly or explicitly, that the Maduro regime is either enabling these hostile actors or maybe even directly involved with them. It bolsters the case for the ongoing and potentially future military posture in the region.
So if the goal isn't just stopping drugs, but also applying this kind of military and political pressure on Venezuela, a country the U.S. is already heavily sanctioning, what are the risks here? What are analysts saying about this escalation?
Well, the administration, they insist this is vital for protecting Americans from drugs.
Yeah.
But analysts are definitely warning about mission creep, about getting dragged deeper.
Deeper into what exactly?
Into a conflict that's legally messy and politically very charged, especially at sea right now.
And the big worry seems to be, what if it doesn't stay at sea? That's the phrase that keeps cropping up in the analysis, right? The risk of this spreading.
Precisely. You've established this legal basis for armed conflict. You've deployed F-35s and nuclear subs. If the designated enemy combatants move onto land, or if the U.S. decides disrupting the supply chain requires going inland,
The NIAC designation legally allows for that.
the precedent is there.
Yeah.
The legal justification could potentially be extended. And that shift from patrolling sea lanes to potential military action on or near another country's sovereign territory, that carries enormous diplomatic and military risks.
That really frames the stakes involved in this legal reclassification. Okay, so let's quickly recap the main points for everyone listening. We've seen a very rapid, very lethal shift, moving away from traditional counter-drug ops under law enforcement
To a formally declared non-international armed conflict. That's the core change.
which allows the U.S. to treat suspected drug traffickers as enemy combatants. And this is backed by a really significant military buildup in the Caribbean. We're talking advanced fighter jets, warships, submarines.
And the key thing to remember is that legal precedent. It fundamentally changes the rulebook for how the U.S. can operate against these kinds of groups, not just here, but potentially anywhere. It shifts the whole paradigm from crime fighting to a wartime model.
Right. Which brings us to that final kind of lingering question that the analysts are raising about this whole NIX designation. If this is now officially an armed conflict, and right now it's focused at sea, What happens if it does expand? What are the specific challenges, diplomatic, military, if this conflict moves, as they warn, potentially on land? How does that reshape U.S. policy across all of South America regarding sovereignty, intervention, and future military engagements? It really opens up a huge set of new questions, doesn't it?
It certainly does. A lot to watch moving forward.